So James, tell us about the business. You obviously set out to solve a problem, and that is for people to know what's actually going on around the country. Was that the premise that you set out to try and achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. When we started Eventfinda in 2006, it was very difficult to find event information online. The market was very fragmented. There were some websites which could tell you what was happening in a specific vertical, a category of events, and there were some websites that would tell you what was happening in a geographic location. But we saw an opportunity to really bring those together into one website, which is what we did with Eventfinda. So the goal was certainly to make it easy for people to find out what was happening. Yeah.
When you look at it, though, it's complicated. You've got multiple users, multiple events, multiple locations. I'm thinking this wouldn't have been an easy back end to actually put together.
It was certainly challenging, yes. And had we known exactly how complex it would be to start with, we might have reconsidered. But what we've done is essentially built up probably the largest venue database in the country now, so that it's very easy for promoters to come in and list their events. But it's also a challenging space because events have multiple stakeholders. You might have publicists, band managers, venue owners, who all have an interest in the event taking place. So yeah, there are certainly challenges there, and the key for us has been to make it so that it was as easy as possible for those event stakeholders to manage their event information.
So you don't have any actual involvement in the events themselves, you simply provide the platform?
That's exactly right, yeah. We're the online marketing channel. So a lot of people think that we do put these events on ourselves. We'll often come in on a Monday morning and have support requests from people who've left their bag under a counter at a bar in Gore over the weekend, looking for us to retrieve it for them. But no, we don't put the events on ourselves. That's right.
What was the most difficult aspect about putting this business together? Because on the face of it, it's an interesting idea, but there are the challenges apart from the back end. What else did you find was difficult about the whole business proposition?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge to start with was when we started, there was no event information on the site. So Michael Turner, my business partner, and I would literally be looking at online posters for events, at TV ads, and going home and typing those things into the system. We literally listed every event ourselves. The challenge for us was to then educate the event promoters and the event stakeholders to list those events themselves, and we provided a system that we thought was as easy as possible for them to do that. So within a few years, we had literally 100% of the event content on the website being listed by those responsible for the events, which that was the biggest challenge, but it certainly made things a lot easier from that point.
Did you ever look around the world and have a look and see if anybody else was doing something? Is this fairly unique?
We're constantly looking. We haven't yet found another business that operates the same way that Eventfinda does. There are other websites that just list event information, but the way that the Eventfinda platform works is we have the event listing and then the syndication, which allows other media channels to also carry the event content. And then we have a ticketing platform built on that as well. And so far, we haven't found another system like it anywhere in the world.
And that's allowed you to actually take the idea and license it, which has been an interesting option rather than actually thinking that you could go and replicate it around the world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in 2009, we were approached by an Austrian media company who wanted to run events themselves on their own websites or have event content on their own websites, but couldn't find a solution to do that. So they asked us if they could license the system. We ended up doing that, and after licensing Austria, we also decided to run the same system in Australia. And about a year ago, we licensed the Australian platform as well. We're currently in the process of finding a licensee for our Singapore website, and we'll be looking for other locations around the world after that.
How much can you protect the IP for this? Because you had an interesting aspect to the way you actually changed your name to create a trademark for yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the interesting thing for us was when we went overseas and we tried to get an international trademark on our name, Eventfinda, with an ER, and we actually had quite a lot of difficulty with that, and we were told it was too generic. So we had a good look at the brand and decided that we'd actually change to Eventfinda with an A at the end. And with that in place, we were able to easily obtain the international trademark for the name, which has given us a lot more confidence now as we go into overseas markets. Yeah.
Interesting that something could be as simple as just changing your name to deal with that issue. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think it was it was something that was a little bit difficult for us. We liked the brand, and I think a number of people around New Zealand were very familiar with the brand and concerned that we were looking at changing it. But it's certainly been the right thing for us to do from a business perspective.
No, of course you can't patent software generally, but what other IP can you protect in a business like this?
There are a lot of opportunities for that. We've taken the approach that we're just going to move as fast as we can and try to take as much ground as we can, rather than stepping back and focusing on protecting the IP behind it. That's certainly our approach at the moment. We might look at that in future, but at the moment we're just moving as quickly as we can.
Just explain the business model, because on the face of it, of course, you've got lots of activity, but it's not a business that has large amounts of cash rolling through it. So how does that side of it work?
Yeah, absolutely, and we're often asked that. When we first started, display advertising was where Eventfinda made its money, and unfortunately, not too long after that, the global financial crisis hit, and we saw 80% of our revenues disappear from display advertising. What we did see, though, was an opportunity for giving events better visibility through the Eventfinda platform. We have 750,000 people coming through the website each month, and 250,000 people on our email database that we go out to once a week. So we were able to provide premium placement options to events that wanted to be in front of that audience. We also looked at syndication, and we were able to monetize the API and the white label products that we have for media partners. We also developed clients in RTOs, regional tourism organisations up and down the country, and a number of major councils. So that helped, and then we moved into ticketing, and we make a very modest per ticket fee on the tickets that we sell through the Eventfinda platform, and then overseas licensing. So in all 5 revenue streams, so quite diverse and robust, and that provides us with a lot of confidence going forward that we're not going to be hit by another GFC that threatens to wipe us out.
What were the difficult parts along the way? Where were the moments where you perhaps lost a bit of sleep putting the business together? Yeah,
absolutely. So in 2006, only 9 months after we launched, a competing website came along with an events calendar on it as well, which was actually run by the New Zealand government, nzlive.com. So that caused us a little bit of difficulty in the early days, and certainly a bit of soul searching as far as whether this was the right direction to continue on. But we persevered, and the story had a very happy ending in that in March 2010 we formed a public-private partnership with the Ministry for Culture and Heritage and effectively merged the 2 competing events websites into the Eventfinda platform. And that has been considered a very successful example of a public-private partnership in New Zealand. So very happy with the way that turned out.
On the ticketing side, I would imagine there is opportunities to make some more money perhaps down the track, but we do have this kind of interesting situation in New Zealand where the ticketing is quite locked up in some cases. Is that something that creates some issues for you along the way?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, ticketing is really divided into 2 types. We have general admission ticketing, which we've been doing now since 2009, very successfully. But then there's allocated seating ticketing, and major venues in New Zealand tend to have exclusive contracts with a large ticketing company, a Ticketek or a Ticketmaster, for example, and that makes it very challenging for new entrants to come into the market when these contracts are designed to exclude competitors for a period of often 5 to 8 years, for example, is not uncommon. That makes it very difficult for us to come in, even with lower pricing and advantages to consumers. It's often not the promoters who have a choice about which ticketing company they're going to use. They often will only have a selection of 1 or 2 venues that they could choose for the type of act that they want to have for their event, and the venue will often dictate to them based on these exclusive contracts who they must use for ticketing. It's a real problem in New Zealand, and it's one that's causing us a lot of difficulty at the moment as we try to expand our ticketing business. But it's one that we believe really deserves some attention in this country. It's been the status quo for a while that these contracts were considered standard and normal, but just because it's the status quo doesn't mean it's right.
And of course, it means ultimately the consumer's paying for that aspect of the market that perhaps isn't operating as efficiently as it should be.
That's right. Generally speaking, these ticketing companies will pay a considerable sum of money to be able to put these exclusive contracts in place. And those fees, of course, need to be recovered somehow. And ultimately, those are added to the ticket prices and result in higher tickets for consumers. I think it's reasonable to expect that with higher ticket prices, the promoters are going to be selling less tickets. So ultimately, it's the promoters and the consumers who are paying the price for that.
So you see yourself as a disruptive brand? You're a disruptor?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we believe that we have technology that makes those sorts of arrangements obsolete. It's no longer necessary for a ticketing company to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars putting in expensive turnstiles and access control systems. We now have mobile validation through an iPhone, for example, and simple apps that make the whole process much, much easier. We've got what we consider to be an industry-leading box office product now, which is all delivered as software as a service through the web, which just negates the need for the expensive upfront infrastructure costs. So we would like to think that we'll be able to use those innovations to disrupt this market, yes.
The other advantage you have at a time when obviously you've got very competitive airfares around, it's very easy for people to get around the country and actually take part in events. So that model has clearly worked to your advantage as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia, for example, it's very different. You know, someone in Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne isn't interested in what's happening necessarily in other cities around the country. But in New Zealand, it's very different. With $65 airfares from Air New Zealand, someone may well decide that they want to fly from Auckland down to Dunedin to see Aerosmith or vice versa. And that happens all the time. And we can see that very clearly because our email subscribers have the ability to say, I only want to see events that are happening in a certain location. In Australia and in the United States, we see those email mailing lists being segmented. But in New Zealand, we don't see that to nearly the same extent.
Where could you take the business? Where do you see the opportunities for growth in the future?
Absolutely. We see a lot of growth yet to come in the New Zealand ticketing market, but the biggest growth for Eventfinda is going to be overseas. We see a future where every country in the world has an Eventfinda platform running in it, providing event information to consumers and providing low-cost innovative ticketing solutions.
So a definite global strategy, global domination.
Absolutely.
And of course, the other interesting prospect for you some way down the track is an IPO. Is that something you consider?
We would certainly consider an IPO, yes. Yeah. The most likely future for us will be through either a trade sale to a larger company, an Expedia or someone like that, for whom an Eventfinda solution would be complementary to their existing products, or an IPO.
What are your thoughts on this issue around technology and the potential for technology to play a much greater role in the New Zealand economy? It's an issue that gets battered around fairly regularly. As somebody that's at the cutting edge, and you recently, of course, were announced as the NZIEM Young Eagle Technology Young Executive of the Year, so you're in a position to make some thoughts, offer some thoughts on that. Where's your thinking in that regard? Yeah,
thanks for that. I won the Auckland Regional Award for the NZIEM and Eagle Technology Young Executive of the Year. So I'll be competing with the Wellington and Christchurch winners in November at the Deloitte Top 200 Awards. But I absolutely agree. I mean, the future for New Zealand is in technology export, and it's companies who are able to really leverage technology and take that into other markets who are going to best take advantage of that. And you only have to look at organisations like Xero and like Vend who are successfully doing that now to see where it's going.
What more should be done to make it happen?
I think the challenge now is really getting people into technology from a young age and helping to marry technology and business. I have business and science degrees from Auckland University, and I think that's been incredibly useful. I think more people need to be focused on that, and the tech startup culture is starting to build here, but it's nothing like what it is, for example, in San Francisco. So a lot more can be done to improve that side of things.
And just finally, the part of being involved in this business that you particularly enjoy, and the satisfaction, I guess, of actually having created something like Eventfinda? What's the advice and the recommendations, the takeaway perhaps for others wanting to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so proud of the team that we've built up here. I mean, we have an incredible group of individuals, 18 staff now, who are all exceptionally good at what they do, and I couldn't be prouder of them. Advice for others is just get out there and do it.